Oh, good morning. So yeah, I hilariously forgot that it's not Ile de Madeline, it's Ile d'Orléans, but whatever. Not a big deal. Yeah, I don't know. It's really funny. Like if you spend enough time on the internet, it's like you come across some things that are just like kind of bonkers. Like, I don't know. I think there's been this conversation. I simply think, from what I've picked up, because all of this stuff is presented in such a way as to never actually make a clear statement. But there's, I guess, supposed to be this idea that I think that I'm like God or something like that, or I'm like Jesus or something, and it's like I've never claimed to be these things, and if I have, it has been as a joke, but like, yeah, like I've never claimed to be these things. I simply figured out ways to do stuff. Like for example, if you want to walk on water, you should just wait until it freezes. I don't know. That seems like a logical thing. Does that mean that anybody who's ever played hockey is therefore Jesus? Maybe. I don't know. Anybody who's ever gone curling, are they Jesus? Maybe. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to consider. Anybody who's gone to just ice skating. Yep. These are all potentials for people who could be Jesus. So yeah, I just find that whole like concept to be very, very humorous to me. Because I don't even believe in like, I don't know. This is an incredibly different tangent from where I was gonna go. Oh, that's because I was gonna talk about that later. Okay. This it's just like, yeah, I don't even believe in like the conception of like a God that is like a parental figure that is like caring and like kind and like a teacher and or who has like rewards for you. I don't believe in that conception of God. I believe in like a God that's very similar to like what Stoics believe, or what like Taoists kind of believe, which is just like God is like a thing that I guess I'm gonna make that video right now. Okay, cool. It's just a thing that like permeates the entire universe, right? And so when it comes down to that, it's like God is simply this like, to me, is simply this like force that exists in all things, and permeates the universe and connects everything together. And that's not different from, there was a philosopher, Baruch de Spinoza, who lived in Amsterdam at some point in time, and he logically created the argument that God exists in all things, including like a blade of grass. From what I remember, to badly paraphrase his argument, to really, really strip down his argument, these are the bare bone minimum things that I remember about this. If you want to look it up, read his book, or listen to somebody talk about it. Who knows more than me, obviously, but like, who is maybe way, 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 way less fallible than I am. What were they going for? Oh yeah, so it's just, yeah, God's just a thing that exists in everything. And then I got really caught up on this idea that maybe God was like water, because hydrogen and oxygen together, like life for some reason doesn't seem to be able to exist without water. As far as we know, from what I understand, ours is the only planet in like the entire universe at this moment in time that has like a source of water that has been able to sustain life on it. I could be wrong. I don't read a lot of science stuff, so maybe they found other places or like other things have come up. But as from my understanding of it, Earth is the only place that we have a source of water that has been able to sustain life in any meaningful sort of way, for this length of time. And because of that, that kind of leads me to think maybe water is the thing. And water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. It's what, 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. And if you look at the periodic table of elements, the first thing that you find is hydrogen. hydrogen is a Greek word, I believe, and it means, it comes from the words hydro and gen that are combined together, and it means water maker. So yeah, that just makes sense. I'm gonna grab my other book because now I'm thinking about this. So you just hang tight. I'll be back. All right, this is my commonplace book. I have been carrying this around with me for like 2 years now, and I just record stuff in here that I want to remember, or I want to at least have like with me when I'm traveling around. So it includes things like random thoughts about water that I've come across over time that have like added into this idea for me, or helped to support this idea for me. And it includes things like bits of like poems that I've read that stuck out to me for some reason or other. And it's just been a very convenient way to sort of have these things accessible to me wherever I've been, which is great, because it does the thing that I wanted it to do, which is become a repository of places that I can keep facts about water, and a place that I can keep, poetry and other things that have maybe stuck with me a little bit in my life. So it starts off with, first of all, my inscription page, where I remember my three ancestors who went off to the Great War, because that was a big part of my travel. So the first is George Franklin Pearson, who served with the 127th York Rangers, which became part of the 1st Canadian Railway Unit. Next is William Gordon Billard, who served with the 25th Nova Scotia. And then there's Enos Ezekiel Ash, who I was unaware of until the end of my trip, and he served with the 7th, also known as the 1st British Columbia. And so those are the 3 people that I have in there, because that was part of sort of my travel. And then we have just my water thoughts, and so some of these you can disprove these probably, but as far as I know, when I wrote them down, this made sense to me. So just like random stuff, like for example, water, like the Tao, exists in almost anything, or at least the things that make up water exist in almost everything, in being hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen is, sort of, to me, the main element of water, because there's 2 of them in it. It's also the most abundant element in like the universe. It means water maker in Greek, and it apparently makes up something like 75% of the universe's mass is hydrogen. That's kind of cool. What else do I have in here? Here we go. Water is very adaptable. It's incredibly adaptable. It will take on the shape of whatever container it is put into, whether it be, a human, an animal, a plant, a bottle, a cup, a bowl, whatever you put water into, it will just conform to the shape of that thing. Water can be a liquid, a solid, or a gas. So it has 3 states. It also has like 2 states of being solid, as far as I'm concerned, one of which is snow, one of which is ice. It can be, and it has these, water has these, like, a lot of things have these, but like water has a lot of these double sort of extremes to it. What's the word for that? Like bipolar opposites or something? Anyways, it can be both fast and slow. It can be hot and cold. It can be soft and hard. It can be destructive or creative. It can be giving or taking of life, and it can be salty or sweet. There's a bunch of other things that I'm sure that you can make about that, but I just haven't put them down anywhere. Water is the only thing that apparently life cannot live without. you can go on a hunger strike for as long as you want to, but it's like apparently after 3 days you'll just die if you don't drink water. So that's an interesting thing. Water is also really good at sort of revealing things that are hidden away through the process of erosion. And in fact, I want to say there was like a thing in, was it in the Orkneys near Scapa Flow or something? There's this like village that had been underneath like the earth, and then like a wave or something came in and like tore away the earth, and that's how they found this like prehistoric village or whatever. I could be wrong about that story, but you know, that it was a thing that I feel like I remember hearing, or like those seem like details that I remember having. So anyways, that's kind of an example of how it does it, but more appropriately I guess would be like how water can also change the things around it. Like for example, the course of a river. Rivers that we have today are not the same as they were when they first came into being, and that's just because as a river like matures and changes and stuff, it erodes the shoreline around it, and so then it just readapts to whatever it's eroded. Water a lot of times is not active unless it's acted upon, and so usually that's like gravity pulling it down causes it to move, or like if it's just still in a cup or something, it will remain still in that cup until you move it, right? So generally it would seem to be, from what I can understand, is that water is just placid unless you like provoke it. Water does what it has to. It doesn't do anything more or anything less than what it has to. It, you know, that's it. Water exists in a cycle. So then this was how water became like a circle. So the life cycle of water is really interesting. Like the idea of like water exists, and then through, what is it? What is that process called? I forget what it is, but like water goes from being like water on the ground to it then goes up and becomes like clouds and stuff. The clouds move, and then it becomes rain, and it falls back down, and then from like there it usually runs off into a river or whatever and rejoins a body of water somehow. So there's like there's the whole cycle of water. There's the idea of like breaking water signifies birth or the beginning of something. You know, we have like those little folksy sayings like April showers bring May flowers. Snow also signals the changing of seasons. It's, you know, the beginning of winter. So yet another way that water shows us that things change. Water is also used for baptisms and to clean, which again is sort of like a beginning, if you will. Because, you know, if you're like me and you're unbaptized, then like you're not necessarily considered part of like a religious body usually. But you know, once you become baptized, then you are part of that body. So therefore, because you've been cleaned, you've been purified, if you will. Jesus walked on it. Moses parted it. John used it to baptize, and Noah, you know, built a boat so that he could survive the flood. Also, you have to remember, apparently there's no more water but fire next time is a thing to remember from John the Revelator, which is a sign that Sunhouse sang, if I remember correctly. Something like 75% of the earth is water. That might not be a correct percentage anymore. Something about like 70% of your body is, and like about a fifth of all the surface fresh water is found in Ontario. That would be about 20%. I went to the tea museum and I found this really cool fact. 77% of tea is water. So when you make tea, 77% of what you're drinking is water. The other 23% is the tea. It's made up of things like polyphenols, proteins, amino acids, alkaloids, xanthan, carbs, minerals, plant pigments, and vitamins. But that was just kind of interesting to me. The Pacific is the largest ocean in the world. It can hold all of the continents inside of its boundaries. Yeah, like every landmass on Earth can fit within the boundaries of the Pacific. It is that massive. It's crazy. It's also the nuclear ocean because of how many nuclear bombs were not only tested there but used there, as compared to like the Atlantic or like the Indian Ocean. Speaking on that fact, maybe not historically is not the right word, but like there was this conception at one point in time that there were 7 oceans in the world. They were comprised of the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Arctic, the Indian, the Southern, and then they included things like the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico. Now, today, we would probably include the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Atlantic as part of the Atlantic. And so because of that, I can say that because I've been to Cuba, up most of the eastern seaboard up to Newfoundland, and then skipping over like Greenland, going to Iceland, down into the British Isles, and then to Northern Europe from France up through Germany, and then having gone to Rome, I have seen a very a very large portion of the North Atlantic because of that, from a lot of different sides, and there's still more of it to see. But yeah, that was just an interesting thing that I came across. Water flows. That's how we describe the movement of water usually. And when your life is in sync with the world around you, everything just kind of flows along with it. There's not a lot of friction, if you will, when you're in sync. When you're not in sync, everything is friction. You can find water in the highest height on Earth, because I believe the top of Everest has snow on it. And you can find it in the lowest low on Earth, which is apparently the Marianas Trench, which is underwater. And so, yeah, so they all have water, earth, and air are found in all of those 3 places in some way, shape, or form. Water connects us. It always has. When you're building a settlement, the first thing you want to build is beside a source of water. Generally, because that not only gives you access to the thing that will keep you alive, but also to a means of like transportation and movement between your location and another location. So, rivers, lakes, oceans, because of boating and like canoeing and stuff, have always been our earliest sort of highways. Siddhartha hears the voices of the world while he's sitting at the water's edge working as a ferryman. And so that's how he becomes aware of, the oneness of the world almost, I want to say, but just the idea of like the larger whole of the world is through listening to water. To continue on with the idea of like water being used to like clean and to purify, like if you go to a Buddhist or a Shinto shrine, usually they have, especially mostly in Japan, I've maybe seen it a little bit in Korea, but usually they have like a water fountain of some kind up front, and you use that to wash your hands and to clean out your mouth before you go in. So that's one way that's used to purify in like a religious context. And then also like Christian sites, you have like holy water and other things, and also baptism. Water is virtually indestructible. Like, it is virtually indestructible. It will change form over being destroyed or being pulled apart and reduced back down to its things, apparently, allegedly, from what I've read. I might have been reading the wrong sources, I don't know. But yeah, mare in Latin means ocean, or at least one of the translations is ocean. Mare sounds very similar to Mary, who is the Virgin Mother of Jesus and the head of Marian Christianity. So that's another way like water kind of connects in through language, to me at least. You could also misread it as mare, and then it becomes a female horse. So like, there's a lot of things that you can do with language that are kind of fun. There's a really fun place in North America called the Triple Divide Peak, and that is the hydrologic apex of North America, and it has water that flows to all three of the oceans that border the continent of North America. And so it has water that you can trace down to the Pacific, it has water that you can trace down to the Atlantic, and it has water that you can trace up to the Arctic Ocean. That's kind of cool. And then yeah, river, like the idea of like water causing change, so like rivers physically change the landscape around them and their courses over time. And also, like, if things are too dry or things are too wet, then this leads to change through those extremes. And so that was just all like some little thoughts that I had about water that I haven't quite connected into a whole idea yet. But it was just things I was collecting as I was going along. I thought this was a really cool quote by Bernard Moitessier. I think this came out of either the Atlantic or the Pacific by Simon Winchester. But this quote is, I am a citizen of the most beautiful nation on earth, a nation whose laws are harsh yet simple, a nation that never cheats, which is immense and without borders, where life is lived in the present. In this limitless nation, this nation of wind, light, and peace, there is no other ruler besides the sea. So that was just a crazy little thing that I came across. But then I have other things like, for example, different people's sort of quotes about water, from like Bruce Lee to Christopher Hitchens. Toni Morrison is in here, Elvis Presley, Thich Nhat Hanh is in here. I have a little bit of the Suragama Sutra in here, which is just the idea of the form of water. And then like some Marcus Aurelius is in here. And then just quotes from different places. I have different translations of the Tao Te Ching in here, being like the idea of how, you know, nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water, yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard, the gentle overcomes the rigid. Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it into practice. Therefore, the master remains serene in the midst of sorrow. Evil cannot enter his heart because he has given up helping. He is people's greatest help. True words seem paradoxical. And that's one of my favorite things about Taoism. There's a lot of this, like, we've stated a thing one way, and now we're going to state it the opposite way, and both of these things are going to be true, and you get to decide which way. It's sort of like Bruce Springsteen. I remember seeing, was it a university commencement speech that he gave where he talked about, you know, when you're creating stuff, you want to keep in your mind the idea that it's both the greatest and the worst thing at the same time. That's a really simple paraphrasing of it, but like, yeah, just the idea of like keeping those two extremes in your head at all times are really important. Like, this is both the best thing and the worst thing that I've ever done, and that like helps you to create. What else do we have in here? These are all things I think that these are all pieces of information that came out of a book on Taoist practice, I think. Yeah, the Chinese character for Tao comes, from the Chinese character for Tao comes the broadest possible scope within which all religions, all methodologies, and all doors leading to liberation fall. We come from the Tao and we go toward the Tao. In fact, nobody has ever once left it, which is also like kind of a scientific fact. Like, you exist in your body as you are. When you die, your body will decompose and return back into the world around you if you're not pumped full of formaldehyde and put into some sort of container that will, you know, keep you away from the world. You should decompose back into earth and become worm food, and then, you know, plant food and all the rest of that stuff. What else do we got in here? I got some more random, like, pulled out quotes from Pacific in here by Simon Winchester. I read a book by a man named Stefan Hertzman, Hertmans, which is called War in Turpentine, and it's about a Belgian. It's a Belgian story. God, why can't I think right now? It's a Belgian story, and in it, it's, you know, like a grandson or something is remembering his father, and he is writing down his father's story during the Great War, because Belgium was overrun by the Germans, and so they still played a part in the war, and so this is part of it is like an account of that, and a lot of it has to do with there's a lot of mixing up of things, like Mary and water are happening in this book a lot of the time, but it just has some like really great little pull quotes from it. Things like, "I drew the water from the rock for you, you gave me gall and vinegar to drink. Holy immortal God, have mercy on us." What do we got here? Anthony Bourdain is in here. Some random stuff that I saw as like street signs are in here. And then, yeah, like there's a book that I read, there's another book that I read by a guy named Jeff Vandermeer called Dead Astronauts, which was really, really cool. And I really liked it. And it contained the idea of like, kind of like time travel, but also like the idea of like reincarnation. And like, there's a poem that later on in here that I included by Thich Nhat Hanh, which sort of covers the same sort of idea. What is the name of that poem? Voyage. The poem Voyage by Thich Nhat Hanh is very similar to the idea of dead astronauts. And so in Dead Astronauts, what happens is there's these 3 astronauts who are going out to investigate this city and try to figure out what happened. And then there's this like duck that's trying to kill them. And then they run into all these things along the way. And it turns out that apparently they've been doing this over and over and over and over and over again. So every time that they die, all 3 of them die, they just go back to the beginning and they start all over again. And so these ideas just carry forward. And so that's kind of similar to the idea of Voyage by Thich Nhat Hanh, wherein he says, he's talking about, he's going on this journey, and then he says, "Tell me, did I stop here once during a previous existence? I find myself looking for my footprints left during one cycle of birth and death. Whose dead body lies by this wall this summer noontime while the sky smiles its blue smile?" And apparently that's him looking at like his past self having died in that location, and now he and his present self are going to eclipse that marker. And so that's kind of where like Dead Astronauts is coming from. Things that are very important that came out of that for me: no one should feel responsible for the whole world, and if we die, we die, but we will be joyous in our death and laughing and light of foot. That was very important to me to pull out of that. Next up, we have Seamus Heaney. I have the Rain Stick. I have some Britta Badur in here. I have some Connor Kerr. Oh my god. Can I pronounce things? I have some Judith Minty, Jim Johnstone, Wanda John Cahawan, Ann Harta is in here. And both of these concern the idea of kind of like the 77 fragments. They're echoes of like 77 fragments of telling like the creation story of like the woman who falls from the sky, and just different parts of it in different ways. And then of course how like Coyote pulls up the mud that then becomes the basis for the world to grow up out of. And I just made some like random thoughts here on the side, just about different things. Events that happened, all the rest of it. Random weird connections where I'm just trying to make sense of things. nothing of any great importance. Then there's Liz Howard is in here, which that was more of like the way that I wrote it down doesn't really encapsulate the actual poem, because it's like a visual poem, so there's supposed to be this like diamond of words in the center of it, and then the rest of the poem exists around it, and I didn't really copy it down in that way, so whatever. It kind of loses some of its meaning because of that. Rita Bouvier is in here, because this so a lot of these poems either concern things like water, space travel, or like Louis Riel and like the Métis and all of that stuff. I think I included. Did I include her at some point in time? I think I did. I think I have now. What is that? That's François Villon, Gill, Ginsberg. This guy, I think I did. I just might not have included them in the spot that I think that. Yeah, I did include Marilyn Dumont's letter to Sir John A. Macdonald in here. So I just wanted to include all these different voices and perspectives on different sides of that issue, because it's fascinating to me. As I've said, like, I grew up in this place where Sir John A. Macdonald grew up in. I have, learned a lot about the history of those sort of policies and things that were enacted by his governments, which no other prime minister following him has ever really changed. And so, yeah, that was just really interesting to me. I have some Katharina Vermette in here, David Lee or Lai, Leslie Below is in here, Philip Levine. Philip Levine is fantastic. I learned about Philip Levine from a song by, is his name Aaron Lee Tasjan? Something like that. It's called 12 Bar Blues. It's really great. But yeah, I learned about Philip Levine from that. He was a poet laureate. And yeah, I really like that poem. Susan Musgrave. Susan Musgrave is a poet who I encountered as I was driving around. I listened to a lot of CBC when I was in the car. I used to have a 2018 Honda CR-V. It was charcoal black, and it had license plates that should have been, I think, CTRJ or CRTJ 520. I think that's what it was. But yeah, it was like Center J 520 is how I remember it. And if you desperately want to try to track down my plates on Highway 70, you're more than welcome to. I mean, it's not like I was going to stop you from doing that anyways, but whatever. So yeah, I have some Susan Musgraves in here because yeah, I listened to a lot of CBC when I was in the car on the radio, and there was an interview with her at one point in time, and she was talking about writing poetry. And I was like, that's really cool. So I bought her book. It was called Exculpatory Lilies. And specifically the poems that I've highlighted here, one where she talks about Lao Tzu, which I thought was really great. And the other one was about like a river. Well, it wasn't really about a river, but it was kind of about a river. I have some Al Purdy in here. Al Purdy is a poet who lived in Prince Edward County and a bunch of other places. What else? I have Audre Lorde in here. I have some Ellie Mitchell and Kristen Costello. Just little pull quotes. I have some Japanese death poems. They're fascinating to me, and especially like people's ability on their deathbed to just compose these little thoughts was really fascinating to me, or is really fascinating to me. But yeah, my favorite is probably the one by Sadatoshi, which is, when luck held out and others thrived, I counted not at all. But when disaster falls, we share one fate. I've got some Margaret Atwood in here. I read like a collection of all of her poetry. It was really good. Michael Ondaatje is in here. E.E. Cummings. I love E.E. Cummings. E.E. Cummings are one of my favorite lines of all time, which is like, you pays your money and you doesn't take your choice, or something like that. And it's just like this incredibly, I'm reading that in high school thinking, isn't that fucking true? You pay your money and you don't even get your fucking choice at the end of the day. Like, it's ridiculous. Capitalism is fucked. Anyways, but yeah, I included some Ian Comics in here because I thought it was really great. I have some Rainer Maria Rilke in here that I got out of, what was that Taika Waititi movie about the Hitler Youth kid? Anyways, there's a pull quote from it that was in there, which is, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror, just keep going, no feeling is final." I got some Hafiz, who's also known as Daniel Ladinsky in here. Interesting stuff, talking about like faith and all the rest of it. I included some pull quotes from a book that I read that was called Love for Imperfect Things by Haimin Sunam, who's a Korean Buddhist. But yeah, there's just some stuff in here that I thought was really fascinating, that I really liked, or that I thought was worth, carrying around with me. And then it included this really interesting poem by a Sister Claudia Lee Hyan, which is a small prayer. So, when flowers wilt, when the sun sets, when a person's life ends, even in our deep sadness, we learn the wisdom to understand and accept fate, and learn the humility to forgive others and ourselves. And that reminded me of a little bit of a play written by Aeschylus in Agamemnon from the Oresteia. I might be pronouncing that wrong, I don't really care. But that poem has stuck in my head because Robert F. Kennedy used it as part of a speech that he gave about Martin Luther King Jr. after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. I forget what city he was in, but he gave this speech about it, obviously, because he had to, and he just did it off the cuff. He didn't plan it. But he included this quote of, "He who learns must suffer. Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart until, in our despair and against our will, comes wisdom by the awful grace of God." So that's the thing that I've always remembered. I have some Bob Dylan Tarantula in here because I really just liked how like crazy, because I guess he was writing it as like stream of consciousness. I just liked the stuff that came out of this. Like, what was it? Guns, the Falcons, Mouth Book, and Gasholt Unpunished. Just like random stuff like, "Find ye your nymph of no conscience, and bombing out your young sensitive dignity, just to see once and for all if there are holes and music in the universe, and watch her tame the seahorse." Or like, "Chug-a-lug, hear me holler, hi-dee-ho. Why are you so frightened of being embarrassed? You spend a lot of time on the toilet, don't you? Why don't you admit it? Why are you so embarrassed to be frightened? Your Uncle Matilda." So I just thought those were really funny, but also because that tied into this idea earlier on from a Margaret Atwood poem, which was called A Sunday Draft, which was, "Uncle, they call you mother. I have never felt less motherly. The moon is responsible for all this, goddess of increase and death, which here are the same. Why try to redeem anything in this maze of condemned flesh without beginning or end, where the pulp of the body steams and bloats and spawns and multiplies itself? The wise man chooses serenity. Here you are taught the need to be holy, to wash a lot and live apart. Burial by fire is the last mercy. Decay is reserved for the living. The desire to be loved is the last illusion. Give it up, and you will be free." What else do I have in here? I have The Ghost Road by Pat Barker. In there's a series of novels that I read that were called the Regeneration Trilogy, and they're about Wilfred Sassoon, and he's a poet, he's in the war, he suffers PTSD, he's sent away to like a mental hospital in the middle of the war, and he meets these other poets and stuff there. And so the first book is about that, and then the second books are about one of the other poets who eventually goes back, I think. But yeah, Pat Barker, and it had this poem in it, in the inscription, that was like, Edward Thomas is Rhodes, and it was, now all roads lead to France, and heavy is the tread of the living, but the dead return lightly dancing. Returning lightly dance, sorry. Sometimes I misread the thing. Douglas Walburn Goff is in here. These were some really cool poems. Then yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh is in here. He was a Vietnamese poet who ended up having to live out the rest of the war in exile in France. Some stuff from Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, so just things like, people ask, have you seen the gods you worship? How can you be sure they exist? Answers, just look around you. I've never seen my soul either, and yet I revere it. That's how I know the gods exist and why I revere them, from having felt their power over and over. And that just, for me, kind of ties into the idea of, like, God might not actually be like a person. God might not actually be this like caring adult figure that we think they are. And instead, God is just like something really simple in the natural world, like water or hydrogen or something along those lines. What did I do? I included a thing about Hui people in here by Carol Howland. I read a book about Hui after I had been there that was really really cool. But yeah, just like, Hui people neither want to reach the highest ranks in civil administration nor fight for the throne. Hui people only want to be teachers, intellectuals, artists, scientists, skilled artisans, or peasants. Their life is fully imbued with the concept of knowing how to be satisfied with what one has, which is also kind of an idea that comes out of things like Taoism and Stoicism and all the rest of that stuff, which is like not wanting for more than what you currently have, but learning to be content with that and learning to work with what you have. What do we have? I have some Shani Mutu in here. As far as I know, Shani Mutu lives in Prince Edward County. So yeah, so I have some of her stuff. I have some Confucius in here. I have some A. Garnet Weiss, which is the pen name of a writer in Prince Edward County here. But they wrote this really cool poetry book. It's called Life After Life, and it's all these poems that have been made from reading people's obituaries and then pulling words from them to rearrange into the poem. So they would take an obituary and they would say, I'm only going to use the words from this obituary to create a new poem. And the stuff that they came out with is really, really cool. What is in here? What was really, really cool to me in here? Music infused. Request no language of the river, always dancing on her own, always willing to free an air to be listened to in dreams. That is made up entirely of words that came out of somebody's obituary. That's fucking awesome. 2, that ties in with the idea of Siddhartha sitting on the side of a river, listening to the voice of the world in it. That also ties into me to the idea of how like a river in Vietnam is called song. The word for river is song. All that was really, really cool to me. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, I just thought that was really neat. I have some John Keats in here. I encountered John Keats first when I was in university. He wrote Ode on a Grecian Urn. The idea of like beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all you know on earth and all you need to know. Comes out of that. I have some John Donne in here. To Mr. Roland Woodward part of it came into here. We are but farmers of ourselves, yet may, if we can stock ourselves and thrive, uplay much, much dear treasure for the great red day. Manure thyself then, and to thyself be manure thyself then, to thyself be approved, and with vain outward things be no more moved, but to know that I love thee and would be loved, and things like the dream. So if I dream I have you, for all our joys are but fantastical, and so I escape the pain, for pain is true, and sleep which locks up sense doth lock out all. I've got some Dante Alighieri in here. I've got some Lucretius, which came out of a book that I read about the Celtic world. Otania J. Okatbatek. I'm not entirely sure that I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but she was a person who was writing about COVID, specifically the aftermath of COVID. So she has a series of poems that are Pi Day, whatever they are, because COVID was what, 314 was when the lockdown started or something? Or around when the lockdown started. And so it was just Pi Day plus, right? Like, pi continues for forever. But like, there was some really cool things in here. Like Pi Day 30 stood out to me. For all the giants falling and the unreported lonesome deaths and already forgotten, slipped out from fast-growing charts and curves and lost and ever-reaching numbers. All the songs that will remain unsung after we lost the music. Bill Withers, Mano Dibango, John Prine, Wallace Roney, Ellis Marsalis. A child rides his bike in a quiet construction site. Look, Ma, no hands. His mother sees him. And these were just all little things that stood out to me. So there's a lot of stuff about music, there's a lot of stuff about water, there's a lot of stuff about like Stoicism and Taoism and like all of these things that are becoming like foundational sort of views. There's stuff about Mary in here. I got some J.D. Carpenter here. Yeah, J.D. Carpenter's in here. I thought there was some like really cool stuff that he was doing with like mixing up music with poetry. That was really cool. There's some Chris Hutchinson in here, which was really interesting to read. It is very much like to read, comes off as this very sort of like Jesse Wells sort of like poetry idea. There's a lot of stuff mixed up in it. Marilyn Dumont is in here, as I said. Edgar Allan Poe is in here because I'm born on the same day as Edgar Allan Poe, so I thought I should probably include something by him in here. But yeah, like just different things like he's a little more, space is another thing that comes up a lot in here. But yeah, he's a little more hard to pin down for like rivers and like water and space and all the rest of it. But yeah, I think outside of The Raven, one of my favorite pieces by him is Alone. From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source, I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Yeah, and then it continues on, and there's some more thoughts, but it's pretty cool. I've got some August Kleinzahler in here, which is all sort of like poems based off of like jazz and like blues and stuff like that. It's really cool, or at least I think it's really cool. I've got some Kay Ryan in here, which was like a collection about sort of like the Niagara River. Rio Cortez made it in here. That was another thing that I read. I've got some Tupac Shakur in here, Rose That Grew From Concrete, because some of that stuff is really, really cool. I've got Francois Villon's Ballade de Dame du Tragédie. So I've got that in here. I've got Nikita Gill, I think is the lot. Oh no, I got more after Nikita. I've got Nikita Gill. I got some Allen Ginsberg. I pulled out some stuff from that, and then I've got Louise B. Half, also known as Sky Dancer, in here. So it's just, yeah, like generally, like if I read something, I try to include something from it. Usually, hopefully, like a complete poem, maybe not. I still got some room in this book to fill up, and then of course, like, not all the pages are completely full, so I'll probably go back at some point in time and fill those in as well as as I continue on with my work, because like there's some things where it's like, for example, if I had a thought about this, I probably would have combined these into one page, but now it just has space that I can put some other random thought in there. So yeah, it's pretty great. But yeah, that's my commonplace book that's followed me around the world for like 2 years now. It's lived with me in my backpack as I've gone from place to 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 place. So yeah, anyways.